So make sure that you're on page 77 in your textbook. We're going to be looking at what happens whenever you come to the end of a journal page and then you need to keep going on another one. So whenever you get to the last entry on a journal page, columns are ruled and totaled. So you have to make sure that you're in balance before you can go on to the next page, because otherwise then you're going to be off balance on the next page and then the page after that, and it could get really messy. So here's some steps to prove a journal. You're going to add each amount column, and then you're going to add up all of your debit columns and all of your credit columns, and then verify that your debits equals your credits. So down here on these steps, we're going to fill these in, but you're not really going to quite understand them until we actually do it on the work together, so just bear with me, fill these in, and then you can come back and reference them later on. So the first thing we need to do is roll a single line across all amount columns directly below the last entry, and that just shows that we're ready to total them. On the next line, you're going to write the date in the date column, and then write carried forward on the very last line. So this will be at the very bottom of the page, bottom of your journal. Then you're going to place a check mark in the post-reference column. Step 4, write each column total below the single line. And then step 5 is you're going to roll double lines underneath those totals. Okay, so after you've totaled up every single column, then you're going to start a new journal page. So we're going to bring those totals forward to the next page. So you're going to write the page number first at the top of the new journal page, then write the date, and then since we're bringing those totals forward, we need to write brought forward on the very first line of our new page. So this will be at the top of new journal page. And once again, you're going to place a check mark there just to show that you've totaled those. Okay, let's go down to the section called Proving Cash. Proving cash is when you determine that the amount of cash agrees with the accounting records. So determining the amount of cash agrees with accounting records. This is just another way to check yourself to make sure that you did everything correctly. Alright, so what you're going to do is after you've totaled every single debit column, you would put it in the places for it, like general debit. Of course, sales doesn't have a debit, but cash debit, and then you would add it up. And then you do the same thing with your credits. So you would write all of your credit amounts down. And then over here, you're going to fill this out. So we would have cash on hand at the beginning of the month, which is usually just 0. And then you would add in everything that you received, and then take out everything that you paid. And then this total down here at the bottom should match the total that they tell you in your textbook. So that's just another way to check yourself. Like I said, this isn't going to make sense until we actually do it. So let's go ahead and get back out that get out the work together from yesterday, and we're going to go through some more transactions, and then we're going to improve our cash to start a new journal page. So here are the transactions that we did yesterday. Go ahead and turn to page 81 in your textbook, and we're going to do work together 3-4. So turn to page 81. All right, we have got 4 more transactions to journalize, and then we're going to show how to rule improve this journal. So on April 23rd, we sold services on account to K Spa. So if we sold services on account, we need to write accounts receivable, K Spa, and our source document is S2. So anytime you see the word sold services, that means sales, and sales is always a credit. So we would credit sales for 150. And then we need to debit accounts receivable for 150. Because we didn't receive cash for it yet, we're just creating this accounts receivable charge to K-Spa. Moving on to the 27th. So on April 27th, we paid cash to owner as a withdrawal of equity. So anytime we pay an owner or withdraw money, that goes to drawing. So we would write down Norma drawing, or Norma Dirks drawing. And we wrote that with check number 7. So if we're paying cash, that means we would be taking cash out. So we would credit cash for 800. And then we need to debit drawing for 800. Because we're decreasing our owner's equity, we would be debiting it. Okay, we have room to do one more transaction before we need to do our totals. So we're going to go ahead and write 29th, and then we received cash on account from K-Spa. So we need to write accounts receivable again for K-Spa. And the document is R3 for receipt 3. So if we received cash, how would that affect my cash? Well, it would increase it, so we should debit it. So I'm going to debit cash for $150. And then we would credit accounts receivable because we're deducting it off of K-Spa's charge. So now we're going to prove and roll this journal because I got to my last entry line. I could go to one more, but then I wouldn't have room to write carried forward. So we need to go ahead and write the date, which would be the 29th. And then we're going to write carried forward. And we will draw a single line below all of these totals. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to add up every single column, and then we're going to make sure that our debits equal our credits. Just to save time, I'm going to go ahead and add these up for you. So I'm going to add up all of these debits in the general column, and that should equal 5,615. Now let's go on to the credit column. That should equal 3,805. Then the sales credit column, when I add all of those up, it adds up to $3,130. Then the total for cash debit is $5,705. And finally, the total for cash credit is $4,385. Okay, so now that we have these totals, we are going to move them over to the next page. And before we do that, let's go ahead and do double lines underneath here. And we're going to put a check mark in this post-reference column. So here's the next page of the application, and we need to start where we left off. So this was April 29th, and we need to write brought forward to show that we're bringing those totals forward. And then put a check in your post-reference column. So the general debit total was $5,615. The general credit was $3,805. The sales credit was $3,130. The cash debit was $5,705. And then the cash credit was $4,385. So before we do any other transactions, let's go ahead and make sure that we're in balance. So right here, I'm going to add up all of the debits. So I'm going to write those out. I have general debit was 5615. I don't have any debits for sales. And then my cash debit was 5,705. So let's add 5,615 plus 5,705. And you should get 11,320. Now let's add up all the credits. So here's one credit in general, here's my sales credit, and then my cash credit. So I would get 3,805 plus 3,130 plus 4,385. And when I add all of that up, it also equals 11,320. So we can see that the debits equaled the credits, so we're good to go. Okay, now we've got one more transaction to do before we prove and roll this whole thing. I know it seems silly, but they just wanted you to practice bringing all those over so that you could start a new page. We also forgot to write up here number 2 on the page number. That just shows that we're going to the second journal page. Okay, so now we have April 30th to record, and we received cash from sales. Remember that since we have a cash column and a sales column, we're just going to write a check mark there. So we need to credit sales for $625 and debit cash for $625. So that's my final transaction for the whole month. So now we're going to draw another single line again, and then we write totals to show that we're done for the month with all of our transactions. So we didn't change anything to general debit, so that's still $5,615. Same thing with general credit, it'd be $3,805. But then I need to add my 2 sales credits together. So that would equal $3,755. and then add up your debit column for cash, and that would equal $6,330. And then our cash credit stays the same, $4,385. Let's go ahead and draw our double line to show that we're done totaling those. And then we're going to prove the second page and prove cash. So let's write down all of our debits. The general debit was $5,615, and the cash debit was $6,330. Now let's add those together, and it equals $11,945. I wrote too big, so I have to skip that line there. Now let's add up all of our credits. So I have 3,805 plus 3,755, and then my cash credit is 4,385. And when I add all those up, it also equals 11,945. So that means we did all of our debits and credits correctly. But we also need to check that our cash is correct, because sometimes your debits can equal your credits, but you may have put stuff in the wrong accounts. So this just verifies that we did it correctly by proving our cash account. So on page 81, on step 5, it says prove cash. The beginning cash balance on April 1st is 0. So we're going to go ahead and put a 0 here. And then the balance on the next unused check stub is $1,945. So that's what we're trying to get it to equal. That's our goal. So let's start with 0, and then we're going to add in all the cash received. Remember, cash received is your debit column because that's where we're increasing our cash. So my total for my cash debit was $6,330. So I'm going to add that in. And then I'm going to take out all of the credits, everything that was paid during the month. And those added up to $4,385. So once we add in 6,330 and then take out 4,385, it equals 1945. So we knew that we did it correctly. All right, so now you're going to finish out your applications. You're going to complete 3-1 through 3-4.1. Okay, do not start 3-4.2 yet. You'll be doing that tomorrow. So you just need to finish out 3-1 all the way through 3-4.1. Have a great day.